Vedanta Narayan Gosai Maharaj Shila Gurudev ki jai. Nitya Vishnu Vishnupad Rakshata Shila Bhakti Vedanta Vaman Gosai Maharaj ki jai. Nitya Vishnu Vishnupad Ashtatashmat Shila Bhakti Vedanta Swami Maharaj Shila Prabhupada ki jai. Nitya Vishnu Vishnupad Ashtatashmat Shila Bhakti Pragyan Keshav Gosai Maharaj ki jai. Nitya Vishnu Vishnupad Ashtatashmat Shila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Gosai Prabhupada ki jai. Nitya Vishnu Mahabhagavat Shila Goksharas Babaji Maharaj ki jai. Nitya Vishnu Shila Satchidananda Bhakti Vinod Thakur ki jai. Nitya Vishnu Vaishnav Sarvabhauma Shila Jagannath Das Babaji Maharaj ki jai. Shri Rupa Gauriya Guru Varga ki jai. Shri Rup Sanatan Bhatta Raghunath Shri Jeev Gopal Padadas Raghunath Sharda Gosai Prabhu ki jai. Shri Sarup Damodar Rai Ramanandari Shri Gaur Parshad Vrinda ki jai. Namachay Shila Haridas Thakur ki jai. प्रेम से कहो श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर शिवासरी गौर भक्त वृंद की जय। श्री क्षेत्र मंडल गौर मंडल ब्रज मंडल मथुर वृंदावन धाम की जय। साहिब अभिष्ट प्रदाता गिरिराज महाराज की जय। श्री राधा कुंज श्याम कुंज की जय। श्री मोहन देवी गंगा देवी की जय। श्री तुलसी महारानी वृंद देवी की जय। श्री भक्ति देवी की जय। श्री पूर्णमासी योग माया की जय। श्री गोपेश्वर महादेव की जय। श्री हरिनाम संकीर्तन की जय। अनंत कोटि वैष्णव वृंद की जय। समागत गौर भक्त वृंद की जय। ग्रंथराज श्रीमद् भागवतम की जय। श्री निताय गौर प्रेमानंदे हरि हरि बोल। Dandava pranams Shri Mataji, Prajumna Prabhu and Madhavi Didi. Sorry I'm a bit late today. I got the call of nature, couldn't ignore it. Om Jnanatimirandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurun Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha. Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Radhikaya Priyatmane Shri Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam Vedanta Narayana Namine. Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prishtaya Bhutale Śrīmate Bhakti Vedanta Swaminiti Namine. Vanchakalpatarubhyascha kripa sindhubhya cha patitanam pavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namaha. Namo mahavadanyaya Krishna prema pradayate. Oh no. Krishnaya Krishna chaitanya. Oh, whatever. Namne Gauratishe namaha. Oh shoot. Sorry guys, I think I forgot to set up where I'm going live. I went live everywhere. Let me just close this. Give me a second, guys. I was rushing and so I wasn't thinking straight. And I need to go live in the Daily Bhagavatam group. There. Okay, sorry about that. Okay, let's continue on. Namo Mahavadanyaya Krishna Prema Pradayate Krishnaya Krishna Chaitanya Namne Gauratishe Namaha. Guruve Gaurachandraya Radhikaya Tadalaya Krishnaya Krishna Bhaktaya Tarbhaktaya Namo Namaha. Yam pravrajantam anupetam apeta krityam dvaipayano virahakatara ajuhavo putreti tanmayataya taravo vinedustam sarvabhuta hridaya munimanatosmi narayanam namaskritya narang chaiva narottamam devim saraswatim vyasam tato jayam udirayet. Shrinvatang Swakata Krishna Punya Shravana Kirtana Hridantasto Yabhadrani Vidunoti Surit Satam Nashta Prayeshvabhadreshu Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya Bhagavatuttama Shloke Bhaktir Bhavati Naishtaki Tavai Vasmi Najivami Tvaya Vina Iti Vigyaya Radhe Tvam Nayamam Charanantikam. Bhaktya vihina aparada laksha ekshiptashtakamaaditaranga Kripa maitam sharanam prapana Vrinde namaste charanaravindam Bhaja Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasari Gaur Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. I accidentally went live on the Gaudiya Vedanta publication Facebook page, and so that's why I'm just deleting it. Anyhow, I went live in a bit too many places today. I'm going to close it here in the Gaudiya Kirtan page, not going live there. If anybody is watching on the Gaudiya Kirtan page and you want to follow, you can go to the Gaudiya Kirtan live group, or you can go to my own Facebook page. All right. What am I doing? Okay, so I'm going to give a quick recap of the whole story that we just read of Daksha and Sati and Shiva. So, and then we'll begin at the Dhruva Charita. Devahuti's 9 daughters were married to 9 powerful sages. Of these couples, Anasuya and Atri begot Dattatreya, Soma, and Durvasa. Wait, am I reading from the right place? Let me just check. Yes, I am. Okay. Okay. So, of these couples, Anasuya and Atri begot Dattatreya, Soma, and Durvasa, the partial expansions of Lord Vishnu, Brahma, and Shiva, respectively. Swayambhuva Manu's other 2 daughters, Akuti and Prasuti, were married to Prajapatis, Ruchi, and Daksha, respectively. Akuti and Ruchi begot a son named Yagya, and a daughter named Dakshina. Prasuti and Daksha begot 16 daughters. 13 of them were married to Dharma, 1 to Agni, and 1 to the Prithvis. The 16th daughter, Sati, was married to Lord Shiva, but she had no children, as she gave up her body prematurely due to a conflict between her husband Shiva and her father Daksha. In this way, Maitreya described the lineages of Manu's daughters. Inquisitive Vidura picked upon Sati's premature death and inquired about the reason for the conflict between Shiva and Daksha. Oops, what did I do? Okay. Once all the sages, demigods, fire gods, and other leaders of the universe assembled to perform a 1,000-year sacrifice. Daksha Prajapati, the expert and chief progenitor, entered that great assembly. Seeing him, everyone except Lord Brahma and Lord Shiva stood up in respect. Daksha offered obeisances to his father Brahma, but noticing Shiva sitting without rising to show him respect, Daksha was enraged. On the pretext of speaking about good manners and culture of respect, Daksha's envy took shape of sharp words as he criticized Lord Shiva. This Shiva is a shameless and proud fellow. He married my daughter and thus accepted himself as my subordinate. Yet he doesn't offer me due respects. He is impure, unclean, homeless, mad, and the master of ghosts and ignorance. Due to his deep-rooted envy, Daksha cursed Shiva. May this Shiva not have a share in the sacrificial oblations. Daksha then angrily left the assembly in spite of the opposition of assembly leaders. Nandishwar, the devout servant of Lord Shiva, became infuriated at Daksha. He counter-cursed Daksha and all his Brahmin supporters who tolerated this impudent behavior. Angrily, he uttered, "Let Daksha have the head of a goat shortly, and his followers continue in samsara, remaining attached to material activities." Now, sage Bhrigu became enraged at Nandishwar and he cursed in retaliation. Let the followers of Lord Shiva become atheists, be diverted from scriptural injunctions, become addicted to wine, flesh, and take shelter of unauthorized and heretical views. Seeing the atmosphere surcharged with intense vibrations of anger, Lord Shiva became morose and left the place. He found this a harmless way to stop the cursing and counter-cursing. Despite the absence of Shiva and Daksha, the other progenitors performed the 1,000-year sacrifice to please Lord Hari. Tensions between Daksha and Shiva continued for a long time. Once Daksha performed another great sacrifice. Unwilling to let the bygones be bygones, Daksha didn't invite Shiva and his followers. When Sati saw hundreds of heavenly denizens going for that sacrifice well-dressed and ornamented, she became desirous to go to her father's sacrifice, although uninvited. Sati approached Shiva and implored, "Many people are going for your father-in-law's sacrifice. I also wish to see my mother, sisters, aunts, and relatives. Please be kind and allow me to go." Protective of his dear wife, Lord Shiva discouraged her to go to Daksha's sacrifice, foreseeing harm to her at the event. Wise Shiva reasoned with emotional Sati. One can go to a relative's house, even uninvited, but only if the host is not a fault finder. The 6 good qualities, knowledge, austerity, wealth, beauty, youth, and heritage, become faults in a proud person who cannot see good in others. You may be the favorite daughter of Daksha, but he will not respect you because of your connection with me. If you neglect my words and go there, the future will not be good for you. Humiliation by a relative is equal to death. Sati was afraid and upset, oscillating between extreme emotions of anger and lamentation, with her intelligence bewildered. She decided to go alone, leaving Shiva behind. Knowing the mind of Shiva, his followers accompanied Sati and took her in a procession to her father's sacrificial arena. There, Sati received a cold reception. Obliging Daksha, no one except her mother and sisters welcomed her. Realizing no seat of honor or sacrificial oblations for Lord Shiva, Sati became furious as she angrily looked at Daksha. Seeing her fuming with anger, Lord Shiva's followers got ready to kill Daksha, but she stopped them. Sati condemned Daksha. Sadhus like Lord Shiva find no faults, but they magnify even the smallest good they see in others. But envious people like you simply find faults, even in great souls, and dare criticize them. I shall no longer maintain this body I have received from you, who have blasphemed Shiva. Thus Sati sat down in the sacrificial arena and meditated on the fiery air within her body. While remembering the lotus feet of her exalted husband, she quit her body in a blazing fire. A tumultuous roar reverberated all over the universe. As Shiva's followers prepared to kill Daksha, powerful ribus created by Bhrigu attacked them, and they fled in all directions. Sagacious Narad Muni disclosed Sati's insult and death to Lord Shiva. Outraged, Shiva became distraught, plucking a hair from his head, and he threw it on the ground. Thus a fearful black demon named Virabhadra appeared, and Shiva ordered him to kill Daksha along with his soldiers. Virabhadra hurriedly went to Daksha's sacrificial arena. To avenge the insulting behavior of many present there, he tore off the mustache of Bhrigu, plucked out the eyes of Bhaga, and knocked out the teeth of Pusha. They were all party to Shiva's insult. Then he cut off Daksha's head and threw it in the sacrificial fire as an oblation. After setting fire to the whole arena, he departed for Kailash. Bruised and fearful, the priests and the demigods approached Brahma and informed him of what had transpired. Disapproving of their behavior towards the great Shiva, Brahma then took all of them to Kailash to pacify him. Tranquil Shiva was sitting under a banyan tree on a kusha mat, speaking about the absolute truth to saintly persons like Narad, Kuber, and the 4 Kumaras. He was grave and seemed to have given up all anger. Seeing Brahma, Shiva immediately stood up and offered him respects by bowing down at his feet. Judicious Brahma praised the exalted position of Shiva in various ways and petitioned, O Lord, please spare sinful Daksha. Such people are already killed by providence due to their mean-mindedness, envy, and for causing distress to others by piercing words. They need not be killed again by exalted personalities like you. Let Daksha, who has been appointed in charge of religious sacrifices, get back his life. Please revive others too. Please take your share of the sacrifice and let the sacrifice be completed. Gentle Shiva smilingly replied, I did not mind their offenses. The punishment given to them was only meant for their correction. He agreed to revive Daksha with the head of a goat. Everyone then proceeded towards the sacrificial arena. Daksha's body was joined to the head of a goat, and his soul was rehabilitated in that body. Adapting to his new body, Daksha saw Shiva and became purified of his hatred. Daksha's heart was heavy with the emotions of remorse for the ill-fated death of his daughter, Sati. Composing himself, he prayed to Lord Shiva sincerely and admitted his mistake. He could see Shiva's punishment as a favor which saved him from going to hell. With everything reinstated, Daksha again began the sacrifice. Shortly, Lord Vishnu appeared there in an enchanting 8-handed form. All the sages and demigods offered him respects and prayers. Lord Vishnu then instructed Daksha, I am the original Supreme Lord, but for the purpose of creation, maintenance, and destruction of this world, I take different names as Brahma, Vishnu, and Shiva respectively. Therefore, there is no difference between Brahma, Shiva, and myself in purpose. In fact, qualitatively speaking, every living being is non-different from me. One shall not differentiate or maintain a view independent of mine. Daksha then worshipped Vishnu, Brahma, and Shiva, and thus his sacrifice was completed. Sati was later reborn as Parvati to Menaka and Himalaya. She again married Lord Shiva, her eternal consort. Maitreya concluded this narration saying, anyone who hears or narrates this pastime with devotion will be rid of all sins. All right, so now we're beginning chapter 8, the story of a determined prince, Dhruva. And because I started late, sorry about that, I might not be able to read everything I was planning on. We'll see how far we get to in half an hour. Oh, and let me check the comments. All right. Dandavat Pranam, Ariana. I don't know how to say your name actually, and I don't know what your devotional name is, but Dandavat Pranam. All right, let's begin. Where is it? Maitreya Uvacha. Why is it not loading? Oh, there. Sanakadya naradascha ribhurhamsharu niryakti naite grihan brahmasutta hyavasan urdvadretasa. The great sage Maitreya said, the 4 great Kumara sages headed by Shanak, as well as Narad, Ribhu, Hamsa, Aruni, and Yati, all sons of Brahma, did not live at home, but became Urdhva Reta, or Naishtika Brahmacharis, unadulterated celibates. Purport by Srila Prabhupada. The system of brahmacharya has been current since the birth of Brahma. A section of the population, especially male, did not marry at all. Instead of allowing their semen to be driven downwards, they used to lift the semen up to the brain. They are called Urdhva Retasa, those who lift up. Semen is so important that if, by yogic process, one can lift the semen to the brain, he can perform wonderful work. One's memory is enabled to act very swiftly, and the duration of life is increased. Yogis can thus perform all kinds of austerity with steadiness and be elevated to the highest perfectional stage, even to the spiritual world. Vivid examples of brahmacharis who accepted this principle of life are the four sages Sanak, Sanandan, Sanatan, and Sanat Kumar, as well as Narad and others. Another significant phrase here is Naite Grihan Hyavasan. They did not live at home. Griha means home as well as wife. In fact, home means wife. Home does not mean a room or a house. One who lives with a wife lives at home. Otherwise, a sannyasi or brahmachari, even though he may live in a room or in a house, does not live at home. That they did not live at home means that they did not accept a wife, and so there was no question of their discharging semen. Semen is meant to be discharged when one has a home, a wife, and the intention to beget children. Otherwise, there is no injunction for discharging semen. These principles were followed from the beginning of creation, and such brahmacharis never created progeny. This narration has dealt with the descendants of Lord Brahma from Manu's daughter Prasuti. Prasuti's daughter was Dakshayani, or Sati, in relation to whom the story of the Daksha Yagya was narrated. Maitreya is now explaining about the progeny of the sons of Brahma. Out of the many sons of Brahma, the brahmachari sons, headed by Sanak and Narad, did not marry at all, and therefore there is no question of narrating the history of their descendants. One second, I'm going to drink some water. Okay, so I think we'll read to verse 16 instead of verse 23. Unless there's time, but I think we'll only have time to read 16. Mrisha dharmasya bharyasid dambang maya chashatruhan asuta mitunang tattu niritir jagrihe praja. Another son of Lord Brahma was Irreligion, whose wife's name was Falsity. From their combination were born two demons named Damba, or bluffing, and Maya, or cheating. These two demons were taken by a demon named Niriti, who had no children. Purport. It is understood herein that Adharma, Irreligion, was also a son of Brahma, and he married his sister Mrisha. This is the beginning of sex life between brother and sister. This unnatural combination of sex life can be possible in human society only where there is adharma, or irreligion. It is understood that in the beginning of creation, Brahma created not only saintly sons like Sanak, Sanatan, and Narad, but also demoniac offspring like Niriti, Adharma, Damba, and Falsity. Everything was created by Brahma in the beginning. Regarding Narad, it is understood that because his previous life was very pious and his association was very good, he was born as Narad. Others were also born in their own capacities according to their backgrounds. The law of karma continues birth after birth, and when there is a new creation, the same karma comes back with the living entities. They are born in different capacities according to karma, even though their father is originally Brahma, who is the exalted qualitative incarnation of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Tayo samabhavalobho nekritischa mahamate tabyam krodascha hingsha cha yadurukti swasakali. Maitreya told Vidura, O great soul, from Damba and Maya were born greed and Nikriti, or cunning. From their combination came children named Krodha, anger, and Hingsa, envy. And from their combination were born Kali and his sister Durukti, harsh speech. Wow, that's a ton of incest. Durukto kalira datta bhayang mrityum cha sattama tayoscha mitunam jagye yatana nirayastata. O greatest of all good men, by the combination of Kali and harsh speech were born children named Mrityu, death, and Bhiti, fear. From the combination of Mritu and Biti came children named Yatana, excessive pain, and Nirai, hell. Sangrahena maya khyata pratisargastava Trishrudvaitat pumang punyam vidhunotatmano malam. My dear Vidura, I have summarily explained the causes of devastation. One who hears this description 3 times attains piety and washes the sinful contamination from his soul. 3 times, eh? Purport. This creation takes place on the basis of goodness, but devastation takes place because of irreligion. That is the way of material creation and devastation. Here it is stated that the cause of devastation is adharma, or irreligion. The descendants of irreligion and falsity, born one after another, are bluffing, cheating, greed, cunning, anger, envy, quarrel, harsh speech, death, fear, severe pain, and hell. All these descendants are described as signs of devastation. If a person is pious and hears about these causes of devastation, he'll feel hatred for all of these, and that will cause his advancement in a life of piety. Piety refers to the process of cleansing the heart. As recommended by Lord Chaitanya, one has to cleanse the dust from the mirror of the mind, and then advancement on the path of liberation begins. Here also the same process is recommended. Malam means contamination. We should learn to despise all the causes of devastation, beginning from irreligion and cheating, and then we shall be able to make advancement in a life of piety. The possibility of our attaining Krishna consciousness will be easier, and we shall not be subjected to repeated devastation. The present life is repeated birth and death, but if we seek the path of liberation, we may be saved from repeated suffering. Atata kirtaye vangsham punya kirte kuru tvaha swayam bhuvasyapi manor harir angshangsha janmana. Maitreya continued, O best of the Kuru dynasty, I shall now describe before you the descendants of Swayambhuva Manu, who was born of a part of a plenary expansion of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Purport. Lord Brahma is a powerful expansion of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Although Brahma is Jiva Tattva, he is empowered by the Lord, and therefore he is considered a plenary expansion of the Supreme Godhead. Sometimes it happens that when there is no suitable living being to be empowered to act as Brahma, the Supreme Lord himself appears as Brahma. Brahma is a plenary expansion of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and Swayambhuva Manu was the direct son of Brahma. The great sage Maitreya is now going to explain about the descendants of this Manu, all of whom are widely celebrated for their pious activities. Before speaking of these pious descendants, Maitreya has already described the descendants of impious activities, representing anger, envy, unpalatable speech, quarrel, fear, and death. Purposely, therefore, he is next relating the history of the life of Dhruva Maharaj, the most pious king within this universe. Priyavrato Tanapado Shatarupa Pate Suto Vasudeva Sakalaya Rakshayam Jagatastito. So we read about Swayambhuva Manu's 3 daughters, Akuti, Prasuti, and Devahuti, and now it's explaining his 2 sons. Swayambhuva Manu had 2 sons by his wife Shatarupa, and the names of those sons were Uttanapad and Priyavrata. Because both of them were descendants of a plenary expansion of Vasudeva, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, they were very competent to rule the universe, to maintain and protect the citizens. Purport. It is said that these 2 kings, Uttanapad and Priyavrata, were specifically empowered by the Supreme Personality of Godhead, unlike the great king Rishabha, who is the Supreme Personality of Godhead himself. Jaye Uttanapadasya Suniti Suruchistayo Suruchi Prayasi Patyur Netarayatsuto Dhruva. King Uttanapad had two queens named Suniti and Suruci. Suruci was much more dear to the king. Suniti, who had a son named Dhruva, was not his favorite. Purport. The great sage Maitreya wanted to describe the pious activities of the kings. Priyavrata was the first son of Swayambhuva Manu, and Uttanapad was the second. But the great sage Maitreya immediately began to speak of Dhruva Maharaj, the son of Uttanapad, because Maitreya was very eager to describe pious activities. The incidents in the life of Dhruva Maharaj are very attractive for devotees. From his pious actions, one can learn how one can detach himself from material possessions, and how one can enhance one's devotional service by severe austerities and penances. By hearing the activities of pious Dhruva, one can enhance one's faith in God and can directly connect with the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and thus one can very soon be elevated to the transcendental platform of devotional service. The example of Dhruva Maharaj's austerities can immediately generate a feeling of devotional service in the hearts of the hearers. Ekada suruche putram ankam aropya lalayan uttamang narurukshantam dhruvam rajapyanantata. Once upon a time, King Uttanapad was patting the son of Suruci, Uttama, placing him on his lap. Dhruva Maharaj was also trying to get on the king's lap, but the king did not very much welcome him. Tata chikir shamanam tam sapatnyastanayam dhruvam suruchi shrinvato ragya sershyam ahati garvita. While the child Dhruva Maharaj was trying to get on the lap of his father, Suruci, his stepmother, became very envious of the child, and with great pride she began to speak so as to be heard by the king himself. Great pride she began to speak so as to be heard by the king himself. Purport. The king, of course, was equally affectionate toward both his sons, Uttama and Dhruva, so he had a natural inclination to take Dhruva as well as Uttama on his lap. But because of his favoritism towards his queen Suruci, he could not welcome Dhruva Maharaj despite his feelings. King Uttanapad's feeling was understood by Suruci, and therefore with great pride she began to speak about the king's affection for her. This is the nature of woman. If a woman understands that her husband regards her as a favorite and is especially affectionate to her, she takes undue advantage. These symptoms are visible even in such an elevated society as the family of Swayambhuva Manu. Therefore, it is concluded that the feminine nature of woman is present everywhere. Na vatsa nripater dishnyam bhavan arodhumarhati nagrihito maya yatvam kukshavapi nripatmaja. Queen Suruci told Dhruva Maharaj, "My dear child, you do not deserve to sit on the throne or on the lap of the king. Surely you are also the son of the king, but because you did not take your birth from my womb, you are not qualified to sit on your father's lap." Purport. Queen Suruci very proudly informed Dhruva Maharaj that to be the king's son was not the qualification for sitting on the lap or the throne of the king. Rather, this privilege was dependent on one's having taken birth from her womb. In other words, she indirectly informed Dhruva Maharaj that although he happened to be born of the king, he was considered an illegitimate son because of his birth from the womb of the other queen. Yikes. Balosi batanatmanam anyastri garbhasambhritam nunam veda bhavanyasya durlaberte manorata. My dear child, you are unaware that you are born not of my womb, but of another woman. Therefore, you should know that your attempt is doomed to failure. You are trying to fulfill a desire which is impossible to fulfill. What a cruel lady. Purport. The small child Dhruva Maharaj was naturally affectionate towards his father, and he did not know that there was a distinction between his two mothers. This distinction was pointed out by Queen Surici, who informed him that since he was a child, he did not understand the distinction between the two queens. This is another statement of Queen Surici's pride. Tapasyarada purusham tasaivanugrahena me garbe tvam sadhyayatmanam yadichasi nripasanam. If you at all desire to rise to the throne of the king, then you have to undergo severe austerities. First of all, you must satisfy the Supreme Personality of Godhead Narayan, and then, when you are favored by him because of such worship, you shall have to take your next birth from my womb. Jesus Christ. Purport. Surici was so envious of Dhruva Maharaj that she indirectly asked him to change his body. According to her, first of all he had to die, then take his next body in her womb, and only then would it be possible for Dhruva Maharaj to ascend to the throne of his father. Maitreya Uvacha Matu sapnata sadurukti veda Shvasanrusha danda hato yatahi Hitva mishantam pitaram sanavacham Jagama matu prarudam sakasham. The sage Maitreya continued, My dear Vidura, as a snake, when struck by a stick, breathes very heavily, Dhruva Maharaj, having been struck by the strong words of his stepmother, began to breathe very heavily because of great anger. When he saw that his father was silent and did not protest, he immediately left the palace and went to his mother. Tang nishvasatam spurita darushtam sunitirutsanga uduhya balam nishamya tatpora mukhan nitantam savivyate yargaditam sapatnya. When Dhruva Maharaj reached his mother, his lips were trembling in anger, and he was crying very grievously. Queen Suniti immediately lifted her son onto her lap, while the palace residents who had heard all the harsh words of Surici related everything in detail. Thus Suniti also became greatly aggrieved. Sotsrejadharyam viralapashoka davagnina davalateva bala vakyam sapatnya smarati saroja Shriyadrisha bhashpa kalam uvaha. This incident was unbearable to Suniti's patience. She began to burn as if in a forest fire, and in her grief she became just like a burnt leaf and so lamented. As she remembered the words of her co-wife, her bright lotus-like face filled with tears, and thus she spoke. Purport. When a man is aggrieved, he feels exactly like a burnt leaf in a forest fire. Suniti's position was like that. Although her face was as beautiful as a lotus flower, it dried up because of the burning fire caused by the harsh words of her co-wife. Alright, so this would be a good place to stop, but I think I'm just going to read on for 7 more minutes. I'm going to read on till 8 o'clock and then I'll stop. Dirgam shvasanti vrijinasya param apashati balakam ahabala mama nagalam tataparishu parishu mamsta bhungte jano yat paradukadastat. She was also breathing very heavily, and she did not know the factual remedy for the painful situation. Not finding any remedy, she said to her son, "My dear son, don't wish for anything inauspicious for others. Anyone who inflicts pains upon others suffers himself from that pain." Satyam surucha bihatam pavan me yadurbagaya udare grihita stanye navritash chavila jateyam bharyeti babodum idaspatirmam. Suniti said, "My dear boy, whatever has been spoken by Surici is so, because the king, your father, does not consider me his wife, or even his maidservant. He feels ashamed to accept me. Therefore it is a fact that you have taken birth from the womb of an unfortunate woman, and by being fed from her breast, and it's unfortunate that you're being fed from her breast. Ah, God, let me just reread this. Therefore, it is a fact that you've taken birth from the womb of an unfortunate woman, and by being fed from her breast, you have grown up. Atishtata tata vimatsarastam uktam samatrapti yadavyatlikam aradhaya thok sajaparaparmam yati chase dhyasan uttama dasanam uttamo yata yati chase dhyasanam uttamo yata. My dear boy, whatever has been spoken by Surici, your stepmother, although very harsh to hear, is factual. Therefore, if you desire at all to sit on the same throne as your stepbrother Uttama, then give up your envious attitude and immediately try to execute the instructions of your stepmother. Without further delay, you must engage yourself in worshipping the lotus feet of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Purport. The harsh words used by Surici to her stepson were true, because unless one is favored by the Supreme Personality of Godhead, one cannot achieve any success in life. Man proposes, God disposes. Suniti, the mother of Dhruva Maharaj, agreed with her co-wife's advice that Dhruva engage himself in the worship of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Indirectly, the words of Surici were a benediction for Dhruva Maharaj, for because of the influence of his stepmother's words, he became a great devotee. Yasyangri parmang paricharya vishva vibhavanatnyata guna vipate ajotятishtat kalu parameshtyam padam jitatma shvasana bhivandyam. Suniti continued, the Supreme Personality of Godhead is so great that simply by worshipping his lotus feet, your great-grandfather, Lord Brahma, acquired the necessary qualifications to create this universe. Although he is unborn and is the chief of all living creatures, he is situated in that exalted post because of the mercy of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, whom even great yogis worship by controlling the mind and regulating the life air. Ram. Purport. Suniti cited the example of Lord Brahma, who is Dhruva Maharaj's great-grandfather. Although Lord Brahma is also a living being, by his penance and austerity, he acquired the exalted position of creator of this universe by the mercy of the Supreme Lord. To become successful in any attempt, one not only has to undergo severe penances and austerities, but also must be dependent on the mercy of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. This indication has been given to Dhruva Maharaj by his stepmother and was now confirmed by his own mother, Suniti. Tata manurvo bhagavan pati pitamaho yamekamatya purudakshinar makai ishtva bhipete duravapam anyato bhomang sukam devyam atapavargyam. Suniti informed her son, your grandfather Swayambhuva Manu executed great sacrifices with distribution of charity, and thereby, with unflinching faith and devotion, he worshipped and satisfied the Supreme Personality of Godhead. By acting in that way, he achieved the greatest success in material happiness and afterwards achieved liberation which is impossible to obtain by worshipping the demigods. Purport. The success of one's life is measured by one's material happiness in this life and liberation in the next. Such success can be achieved only by the grace of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. The words ekamatya mean concentrating one's mind on the Lord without deviation. This process of undeviating worship of the Supreme Lord is also expressed in Bhagavad Gita as Ananya Bhak. That which is impossible to obtain from any other source is also mentioned here. Other source refers to the worship of the demigods. It is especially stressed here that the opulence of Manu was due to his undeviating faithfulness and the transcendental service of the Lord. One who diverts his mind to worshipping many demigods to obtain material happiness is considered bereft of intelligence. If anyone wants even material happiness, he can worship the Supreme Lord without deviation, and persons who are desirous of liberation can also worship the Supreme Lord and achieve their goal of life. Tameva vatsashaya bhrita vatsalam mumukshubhir mregya padabjapa datim ananya bhave nija dharma bhavite manasya vastapya bhajasva purusham. My dear boy, you should take shelter of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who is very kind to his devotees. Persons seeking liberation from the cycle of birth and death always take shelter of the lotus feet of the Lord in devotional service. Becoming purified by executing your allotted occupation, just situate the Supreme Personality of Godhead in your heart, and without deviating for a moment, engage always in his service. Okay, we're going to end with this purport. The system of Bhakti Yoga described by Queen Suniti to her son is the standard way of God realization. Everyone can continue in his constitutional occupational duties and at the same time keep the Supreme Personality of Godhead within his heart. This is also instructed by the Lord himself to Arjuna in Bhagavad Gita. Go on fighting, but keep me within your mind. That should be the motto of every honest person seeking perfection in Krishna consciousness. In this connection, Queen Suniti advised her son that the Supreme Personality of Godhead is known as Bhritya Vatsal, which indicates that he is very kind to his devotees. She said, "You came to me crying, having been insulted by your stepmother, but I am unable to do any good for you. But Krishna is so kind to his devotees that if you go to him, then the combined kindness of millions of mothers like me will be surpassed by his affectionate and tender dealings. When everyone else fails to mitigate one's misery, Krishna is able to help the devotee." Queen Suniti also stressed that the process of approaching the Supreme Personality of Godhead is not easy, but is sought after by great sages who are very advanced in spiritual realization. Queen Suniti also indicated by her instruction that Dhruva Maharaj was only a small child, 5 years old, and it was not possible for him to purify himself by the way of karma kanda. But by the process of bhakti yoga, even a child less than 5 years old, or anyone of any age, can be purified. That is the special significance of bhakti yoga. Therefore, she advised him not to accept worship of the demigods or any other process, but simply to take to the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and the result would be all perfection. As soon as one places the Supreme Personality of Godhead within one's heart, everything becomes easy and successful. All right, so it is 8:01. We're 1 minute over time. Just going to read this translation because I wanted to read up to this verse, but we ran out of time. My dear Dhruva, as far as I'm concerned, I do not find anyone who can mitigate your distress but the Supreme Personality of Godhead, whose eyes are like lotus petals. Many demigods, such as Lord Brahma, seek the pleasure of the Goddess of Fortune, but the Goddess of Fortune herself, with a lotus flower in her hand, is always ready to render service to the Supreme Lord. And tomorrow we will read about, what is it? Narad tests Dhruva's determination, and Dhruva expresses Dhruva expresses his ambitious goal and Narad instructs him on the process to attain it. That's what we're reading about tomorrow. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Nitai Gaur, Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Nitai Gaur, Hari Bol, Nitai Gaur, Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Nitai Gaur, Hari Bol. Jai Shishi Guru Garanganta Vikagiri Shishi Radha Vinod Bihari Ju ki Jai. Shri Govinda Gopinath Maran Mohan Ju ki Jai. Nitil Pavishtam Vishnupar Ashtara Shatashmar Shila Bhakti Vedanta Narayan Gosai Maharaj Shila Gurudev ki Jai. Nitil Pavishtam Vishnupar Ashtara Shatashmar Shila Bhakti Vedanta Vaman Gosai Maharaj ki Jai. Nitil Pavishtam Vishnupar Ashtara Shatashmar Shila Bhakti Vedanta Swami Maharaj Shila Prabhupada ki Jai. Nitil Pravishram Vishnupar Ashtar Shatashmat Shila Bhakti Pragyan Keshav Gosai Maharaj ki Jai. Nitil Pravishram Vishnupar Ashtar Shatashmat Shila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Gosai Prabhupada ki Jai. Nitil Pravishra Mahabhagavat Shila Gokshara Swavaji Maharaj ki Jai. Nitil Pravishra Shila Satchidananda Bhakti Vinod Thakur ki Jai. Nitil Pravishra Vaishnav Sarvabhauma Shila Jagannath Das Prabhuji Maharaj ki Jai. Shri Rupa No Gauriya Guru Varga ki Jai. Shri Rupa Sanatan Bhatta Raghunath Shri Jeev Gopal Patadaksha Gunath Shara Gosai Prabhu ki Jai. Shri Sarup Damodar Rai Ramanandari Shri Gaur Parshad Vrinda ki Jai. Namachay Shri Haridas Thakur ki Jai. Prem se kaho Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shri Vasari Gaur Bhakta Vrinda ki Jai. Shri Kshetra Mandala Gaura Mandala Vraja Mandala Mathura Vrindavan Dham ki Jai. Sarva Abhishta Pradata Giriraj Maharaj ki Jai. Shri Radhakun Shamakun ki Jai. Shri Muna Devi Ganga Devi ki Jai. Shri Tulsi Maharani Vrinda Devi ki Jai. Shri Bhakti Devi ki Jai. Shri Purnamasi Yoga Maya ki Jai. Shri Gopeshwar Mahadev ki Jai. Shri Harinam Sankirtan ki Jai. Anantakoti Vaishnav Vrinda ki Jai. Samagata Gaur Bhakta Vrinda ki Jai. Grantaraj Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam ki Jai. Shri Dhruva Maharaj ki Jai. Shri Nitai Gaur Premanande Hari Hari Gaur. Vrindaya Tulsi Devaya Priyaya Keshavashacha Krishna Bhakti Pradadevi Satyavataya Namo Namaha Pancha Kalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhyaiva Cha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. Dandavad Pranams. So this evening, well, right now it's 8 o'clock a.m. So at 8 o'clock p.m. in 12 hours from now, I'm going to, for Keshav Vrat, I'm going to sing the Vrindadev Ashtakam, the Keshav Ashtakam, and then I'm going to read an article. I'm planning on reading a different article from Rays of the Harmonist magazine, different articles by, yesterday we read an article by Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur, and today we'll read something by Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur, and we'll just continue doing this. Or I don't know, I'm not hard committing to this because some days I might need to be in Mayapur in the evening time or something, but I'm just going to do it every day and I'll let you know if I'm not able to do it. All right, Jai Shri Radhe Haribo. Oh, and there's a question here. What is it? Oh, the Dhruva age? Yeah, he's still ruling on the pole star. So he's still aging. I'm not sure if that answers the question, but yeah. What else? Okay, Dandavad Pranams. Hey, Liana, I need to know your devotional name. All right. Dandavad Pranams Indira Mataji and Prajumna Prabhu Haribo. See you all tomorrow. Or this evening. Jai Shri Radhe. Oh, and pranams to your mother, Pradyumna Prabhu. Haribol.